Hey guys, it's Creepypasta Bro Chase here, along with Mr. Alex. We'd like to quickly apologize for not uploading any videos recently, as I have had some personal issues come up. But Alex, Alex is ready to get back into this, right, bud?
Let's get at her, dude.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get into the
I think
first
we've got
story.
what, like four stories
We've
for
got
the
four
day.
stories to read today, so we hope you guys
Got
enjoy
the
it.
got the. I'm a criminal psychologist, and I interviewed a man a few years ago who shot his friends at a crowded marina because he thought they were monsters. He may have been telling the truth. As a criminal psychologist, I've heard it all. Virtually any outrageous reason you can think of for why someone committed the crime they did, I've heard. Now, when I say I believe someone who told a preposterous story, it's because I do believe that is the reason they did it, due to whatever mental illness they might suffer from. There's times I believe them when they say a leprechaun told them to kill their neighbor. Obviously, I don't believe an actual leprechaun manifests itself to this person and that they actually only did what they did because they're crazy. But in my line of work, you have to talk it to the person as if what they were hallucinating about actually happened. This case was different, though. I think I believe his story, and not because he thinks that's what happened, but because I've had a feeling for a long time he was not suffering from any mental affliction and might actually have been telling the truth. I'm going to post the transcript from my interview with him here on No Sleep. There will, of course, be some redacted information. Names were changed, and I've cut out a lot of my trivial interjections in the interest of flow and pacing. Any interjection from me will be in parentheses and will otherwise be told from his first person perspective. I'll leave it up to you to decide if he's crazy. A little about him before we start. He was a PhD educated professor of biology, anatomy, and pathology, and serves as the chairman of the biology department at the local university. He had no personal or familial history of any kind of mental illness. Please introduce yourself while you're here. My name's Michael, and I shot my friends Dave and Gary right outside our personal science lab at the docks near Marina. Let's start from the beginning. It all started a few days ago when the school year concluded. We were taking our annual camping trip to celebrate the end of exams. It was me, Dave, Gary, and John, all fellow biology department professors. We go to a provincial park in Canada every year. We spend a few days at a campground, and then we go deep woods wilderness campsite that we have to use our canoes to get to. That's our favorite part, the deep woods. There's never anybody there, and we're all alone. But the vacation went well at first. Once we found a nice site in the back of the woods, that started off great too. I'm scuba certified, and we've never been to this part of the lake before. We were more backwoods than we'd ever been. I was eager to dive here. How's the visibility? Most lakes I've heard like this, visibility isn't great, but there's nothing to see. True, there's not much to see. It's the same kind of fish you can see in a city park pond. But there's something about diving in a body of water few people ever touch. It's mostly unsullied by people's garbage and whatnot. What'd you see down there? I didn't dive until our second day. It was very uneventful, but part of the enjoyment for me. Like I said, was being 30 feet down and not seeing any trash or anything man-made at all. We went out further towards the center of the lake. Visibility was low, so I didn't see it right away. It kind of crept up on me. At first, I thought it was a small propeller plane or something, but I quickly realized it was too big. It was regularly shaped, for sure, and had a large shaft toward what I figured was the rear of the craft, protruding upwards at a small fin at the top. The fin was probably about 15 feet or so below water level. I swam to what I thought was the front of the craft and saw a rounded area sitting atop the edgewise pointed bow. It had a little window that I thought must be the cockpit. The glass was broken and it was impossible to see anything inside. I quickly came to the conclusion on the basic design of the vessel was not here in man-made craft I've ever seen or heard of, and that I was potentially looking at a UFO. I reserved full judgment on whether or not this was a UFO until I got a second opinion. John was also a diver and brought a tank. I'd have him go down with me to investigate further. I really shouldn't have been diving by myself anyways. John was immediately intrigued when I told him I found an aircraft bottom of the lake and it didn't look anything I've ever seen before. He's ready to go in minutes. We took a canoe out where I thought it was to save air and went down. We found it relatively quickly. It is thorough a swim around as I did. Seeing it again, it was kind of shaped like a large arrowhead. Look up F-117 Nighthawk. It's kind of what it looked like, though it looked much more alien in design. It wasn't flat underneath. It had a bulkier cargo area or something below. John found a large opening in the hull underneath what appeared to be the left wing of the craft. He was ready to enter, but I stopped him. My air was too low and it was getting dark. I motioned for him to meet me at the surface, so we swam back up. I told him I needed to switch to my other tank. Each of us had brought 2 tanks if there was any chance of us entering the craft. I also told him it would be much better to wait until morning. Spent that night telling Gary and Dave we would see. Gary immediately became paranoid. He was of the mind, since we even knew this craft existed, there was danger from the government. If we swam into the aircraft and actually found an E.T., the pilot, we were as good as dead. We eventually decided we were indeed going in. We toyed with Gary, saying the pilot was probably long gone. He swam out the back, assimilated into human form, and probably replaced, and is now living as the Queen of England. We eventually went to bed, but I hardly slept at all. I don't think John did either. The next morning, John and I went down again. We approached the hull breach. It was more than large enough for us to fit in one at a time. It's important to note the exterior of the aircraft was metallic, but it was difficult to say what material. But I found it interesting that the outer hull was completely free of aquatic fungus or algae, or even rust. Anything that would indicate it had been there a while. This led me to a recent crash, and that made me nervous. We secured a rope near the outside of the craft so we could follow it and find our way out if we got turned around at all. Once we got inside, the interior told a different story. The inside was very dilapidated, nowhere near the almost pristine nature of the outer hull, judging from the aquatic plant life and algae that we could see growing and the amount of fish that settled and darting out of every crevice we swam by. It appeared this vessel had been down here for some time. We appeared to be in some sort of cargo area. There was an open door near the back, and we looked at it and appeared to be an engine room. We examined what we believed the engine, but rubble and pillars had fallen and blocked our access to the greater part of the area. We proceeded down a narrow corridor towards the bow. We swam right, and we came to a ladder. This ladder went up a few feet, and we saw what appeared to be a hatch that was closed. We swam up to examine it, pushed on it first, no avail, and searched around the area until I saw what appeared to be a lever off the side. I motioned to John, he motioned for me to pull it. I did so, and we heard something near the hatch mechanically release. Which also released a large amount of air bubbles into the water, but the hatch remained closed. We puzzled over it for a few seconds before John pulled out his diving knife. He attempted to slide it onto one of the edge of the right side of the hatch and was able to penetrate a few inches. He worked at it for a few minutes, and the hatch inched open slightly before the blades snapped. It had opened just enough for us to get our fingers in, so we tried pushing and pulling. There was much resistance, but with combined efforts, we had the hatch slowly begin to open. We swam up to what could have only been the cockpit. I saw a broken window I had never seen from the outside. John swam ahead and around what appeared to be a large chair, probably for the pilot. I heard him let out a muffled cry of extreme surprise and swam back towards me faster than I had ever seen him swim. His mouthpiece had fallen out of his mouth, and he had to put it back in. His eyes were wild. He pointed to the chair and made back and forth movements with his hands like he was turning a steering wheel. I was slightly confused, but then he pretended he was using a joystick and made muffled sounds with his mouth. I realized he was pretending to fly a plane, and the sounds he was making were supposed to be machine guns. I then realized he was trying to tell me the pilot was still sitting in the chair. I motioned for him to calm down. I was afraid as well, but I knew I needed to see this. I motioned to him that I was going to go look for myself. I motioned for him to stay, but he shook his head. I then proceeded to swim slowly around the chair and followed behind me. I don't any doubt this was a UFO was then extinguished. The being sitting in this chair was humanoid, but definitely not humans. Its head was about 20% larger than humans, I'd say, and it was probably about 4 feet tall. Its arms were floating lifeless in the water and were disproportionately long. I took note immediately about how the area appeared to be no rot or skin breakdown on this, despite being the length of time the cargo area indicated the craft had been in the water. I knew John and I needed to actually speak, so I motioned for us to retreat. We returned to the surface and discussed our options. After the initial holy craps and what the hex, we discussed our next options. The first was to simply leave and not tell anybody, including Gary and Dave. Who had seen, we knew we'd never be able to keep that secret, so that was out. We discussed a few more options before I realized what we needed to do, or I should say what I badly wanted to do. I told John we needed to get it back to our lab, and we had it at the docks and perform an autopsy. He looked at me like I was a complete idiot. He asked how the actual hacker was supposed to get it back to the States. I told him my plan. He said it just might work. We then retrieved the body carefully and loaded it in the canoe. I went back to the Jorville. John swam. I don't think he wanted to sit in the boat with the body. Unsurprisingly, Gary and Dave absolutely flipped out when we got back. I told them we were leaving right now, going back to the car, driving straight home. They were confused at first, but then John told them was down there was not only a UFO, but the pilot was in the canoe. Gary turned white as a ghost when he saw it, and Dave was intrigued. I then laid out my plan. We drove an oversized cargo van. There was a bench seat in the back, sat about a foot off the floor, so we could put crap underneath it. My plan was to leave the body in the canoe pack, iced and covered up, and put the canoe in the back with us instead of on the roof. It would just fit since the front end would be able to fit underneath the bench seat in the back. We then drive straight to our lab. What kind of lab is this? You just have your own labs? We use it for ourselves. It's rented space in one of the warehouses. We just use it to set up lab assignments for students or test new assignments we think to make sure they're actually a viable assignment. Okay, please continue. Gary freaks out and almost loses it. He says we get randomly searched when crossing the border. They'll find the body and we're good as a black bag. Dave tells him that as long as everybody shuts up and only the driver talks, we'll be fine. We all argued for about 20 minutes about it before it was settled. We were taking this body back to our lab. They got everything packed up and ended up leaving some of the things we could replace later since we were in such a hurry. It was a 3-hour drive, but only 1 hour to the border. We just had to get across. I would be the driver and would do all the talking. Gary was a nervous wreck as we watched cars seemingly at random get backed over to a separate drive area to be detected. He held it together somehow. Crossed over without incident. Gary had a mental breakdown as we pulled away from the station near home free. We changed the ice several times, so pulled up. I drove slightly below the speed limit since we certainly didn't need to get pulled over. We got to our lab about 2:30 in the afternoon. We smuggled the cadaver into our lab and set it out on the table. We locked all the doors and made sure the windows were drawn as well. I realized at this time we were at the point of no return. We were about to perform an unauthorized autopsy on an alien life form. We had no idea how we were supposed to publish our results or what we were supposed to do when we concluded. We were all likely to get black bags, which was something the government wanted to keep secret, but we had to come this far and there was no way we were stopping now. We video recorded the entire thing. My initial examination revealed the ET did not have a sternum similar to humans. It had 2 large sternum-like bones on the left and right sides of its chest, but the center was soft, making an easy choice for a first incision. We cut deep in order to open it up. It was fascinating. It appeared to have all the same internal organs as we do, just in different spots. It was hard to tell what was what aside from the lungs. We concluded that it must be the lungs because they were filled with water, initially indicating the cause of death was drowning. There did not appear to be any trauma anywhere while in the ET's body, so we also concluded it may not have actually crashed as initially thought. While we had opened up, we labeled all of the organs we thought we could. Whether or not it was actually correct was obvious, we had no idea, but for the sake of completion, we assigned everything and came to the conclusion ET had a heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, and possibly a spleen. We then moved to its head. Its brain was similar to humans, in that it looked similar, and as far as we could tell, consisted of several different lobes, though the main difference was that it appeared to be triangular in shape, as it were pyramids sitting within the skull. There was also a small, unknown gland situated near the base of the brain itself. We had initially deduced the brainstem was already accounted for, so what the other gland was, we had no idea. It was at this point in the procedure that Dave stated the gland was, quote, feeding. I asked how that could be possible, since this creature was clearly dead, but upon inspection I too noticed it did appear to be feeding, very slowly. I placed my hands softly upon the gland and felt its pulse. I noticed immediately a silvery, metallic-looking bodily fluid of some kind on my glove that this gland appeared to be secreting. Not only did it appear to still be pumping the substance through the body somehow, it also secreted it into the cavernous space of the skull and down the spinal column. Using a syringe, I pierced the gland and was able to aspirate a significant amount of the fluid. It was a silvery liquid that looked similar to mercury but lacked a shine. It was a very dull silver in color. I placed it in a vial for further research. Was it blood? I don't know. I don't believe it was. It was simply because the next day we found out what it did. What was that? We spent all day theorizing over findings. We spent the night in the lab and didn't call our families. We weren't due back for a few days anyways. We woke up the next morning to a shocking finding on the cadaver. The incision I made in the chest was in an advanced state of healing. We didn't equate the substance to the healing until after we discussed how an incision so large as to open the entire front of the torso could possibly look this healed in a little over 18 hours. We deduced this mystery gland with the mysterious substance as the only thing still functioning on this cadaver, somehow despite its deceased status. We decided we needed to test this hypothesis. I could talk for days about our experience, so I'm going to have to break it down to the most important parts. We decided to inject this substance into lab mice to see how they reacted. The first 3 mice we injected appeared to die, but didn't actually perish. Clinically, they appeared dead, meaning the fluid was incompatible to the point of causing death in the subject, but after declaring them dead, they were found to be active again after a short time, though they seemed almost rabid. They viciously attacked the other mouse in the pen and killed it immediately, and appeared to begin to cannibalize its corpse. I want to take time to interrupt the transcript to say I've never heard of anything this thought out and scientific in my entire career. I am absolutely hooked at this time, and despite it being an appropriate time to break, I don't. We then attempted to terminate the rabid mice using an injectable toxin. We've euthanized many of mice using this method, and the first time it did not have any effect on the 3 of them. I then doubled the dose and injected them again. They should have been dead in less than a minute, but they remained as active as before. Dave took over at this point. He took the tongs that we used to hold them in place and pierced their skulls with the syringe. This method effectively resulted in their deaths. John then suggested we inject a few more mice, but keep them all separate. I agreed, and I proceeded to inject 3 more mice with the fluid. It was at this time we decided to test our hypothesis that this substance was providing the cadaver healing property despite it being dead by removing the gland. We extracted more of the silvery fluid since we feared removing the gland would result in loss of the fluid pressure itself. After the gland was removed, a large incision was made to test our hypothesis. Nearly 8 hours, the incision had not healed at all, thus proving our hypothesis. Whatever the fluid was, it had a tremendous healing effect on E.T.'s body. That must have been why there was no trauma on the body from the crash. It had been healed. We also theorized the subject could not actually bring the E.T. back to life should it perish, as it appeared to have drowned and died. I'm getting ahead of myself. Shortly after euthanizing the lab mice, we performed an autopsy on one of them. Though they had been dead only about 15 minutes, its internal organs told a different story. Atrophy and shrinkage of the internal organs indicated the mouse had been deceased for several hours. Knowing this could not possibly be, we examined its brain, where a large concentration of the soda fluid had accumulated. We had no explanation for this, and after lots of conjecture, we hypothesized that with the amount of this fluid being located in the brain of this mouse, that somehow retained its healing property, and despite the apparent toxicity of the substance, it somehow kept the mouse's brain active, though on a very primitive level. While it caused the rest of the body to waste away as if it had expired, we felt this was an appropriate hypothesis given the toxin we used had no effect on the mouse, and only after we pierced its brain did it finally expire. We then did an autopsy on the other 2 mice, which produced identical results. So what happened with the other set of mice? This is kind of the beginning of the end. 2 of the mice proceeded exactly as the first 3 had. They appeared to die, only they did not, and became rabid, immediately attempting to attack our fingers when we pressed them up to the glass. The 3rd mouse, however, exhibited something else entirely. Long after the other 2 had gone rabid, the mouse appeared to be completely unaffected by the injection of this fluid. We needed to be very careful with this mouse and how we proceeded, as it was not exhibiting symptoms of toxicity from the fluid. We needed to ascertain whether or not the mouse's body had accepted the fluid and was now capable of regenerating from physical energy, or if it was simply carrying the fluid in its body. Carrying as in medical sense with disease? Correct. This mouse could simply be immune to the toxicity or incompatibility and not be able to regenerate from injury. It just carries this fluid in its body. Unfortunately, John got ahead of himself. Seeing the mouse appeared to be perfectly fine, he picked it up. It bit him hard enough to pierce his glove and on his left thumb. Dropped the mouse and it scampered away. Gary and Dave immediately tore the place apart looking for it, as did I when John began scrubbing and decontaminating. We were not able to find it. We had lost our only successful specimen. We advised John to go to the hospital immediately, but he declined. It was his fault we lost the mouse, and he was determined to continue searching for it. We should have insisted harder that we did that. He go. We never found the mouse. We spent most of that day in conjecture and hypothesizing our findings. By the evening, we were still going over and I was making urinal entries. At about 6:30 p.m., John had an uncontrollable coughing fit. He looked pale and diaphoretic, and we knew it was because of the mouse biting him. His thumb also looked disgusting. We were all biologists. We should have known to stop what we were doing and take him right away. But we couldn't peel ourselves away from what we were doing. Gary volunteered to take him to the local ER, while Dave and I stayed behind. I never saw John again. While we were alone, Dave mentioned we needed to test the fluid on something other than a mouse. So it was at this point I realized we'd all gone too far. We just left the crash site alone and certainly shouldn't have entered it. Dave was starting to become fanatical, bordering on unethical. Started to offer picking up a stray dog or cat when he mentioned a homeless person. It was at that point I knew he was trouble. I told him there was no way any of us could possibly partake in something so unethical. curious the fact that somehow we needed a human test. Maybe it was just something with the mice human hosted of the fluid. It could potentially be synthesized to create the most powerful healing agent known to man. Sickness and disease could be eradicated if it worked. I repeatedly told him if it worked, we'd be responsible for the death of a human being if it didn't. I would be absolutely be murder. After a few moments or so, I realized we did have a human test. John. I told Dave just look at John. He's showing the same symptoms of the decline the mice did. He then told me that can't be considered a true test. The mouse couldn't possibly have passed the mysterious fluid through a small, simple bite. A full injection needed to occur. I began to realize that with John's condition, that the fluid appeared to be acting like a true disease. If it were to be able to transfer via a bite and cause rabid insanity in anyone who was incompatible, you could be looking at a major outbreak. Felt like I needed to call the hospital to warn them. Did you? I didn't get the chance. Gary came back at that point and said John appeared to look even worse after only 20 minutes in the car. I informed him what I had talked to Dave about. He immediately concurred we needed to stop what we were doing. We went back to the lounge room. We rented out several other small offices in addition to the area we used for the lab, and found Dave was missing. Fearing the worst, immediately went back to the lab and found him with a tourniquet on his arm. He was injecting silver fluid into his arm. Gary asked him, "What the hell did you do?" And I had some choice questions myself. Knowing he had just signed his own death certificate, I knew we needed to involve the police at this point. I was not optimistic that his body was going to accept the fluid as the mouse's had. We discussed our options at that point. I reiterated my theory on how this fluid acted almost like a virus. All but one of the mice had succumbed to the incompatibility and eventually went insane. It was my theory that one of two things occurred in the mouse that did not. Either for some reason unknown, the mouse accepted the fluid was now a super mouse, or the mouse was simply acting as Gary, meaning it was unaffected by the fluid and was simply carrying it. Either case would still be capable of transmission via bite. Gary was a virologist. He mentioned one of the things. Some viruses cause mutations of the host genome. Nothing like you see in the movies where they turn into hulking monsters, but we had to consider two things. This wasn't actually a virus, it just appeared to act like one. And if it did cause a mutation, there's no telling what that would mean. You shot him, so obviously it went bad, and I'm guessing you wouldn't have mentioned this mutation thing if that's not what happened. That's what happened. I guess we'll just skip to the main event. I could ramble on about theory and our scientific shenanigans all night. We didn't get much sleep that night, kind of Dave. We drew some blood and did an analysis of blood and was loaded with some sort of antigen. No doubt a product of the introduction of that fluid. It seemed like it was rewriting his genome somehow. By midnight, he was noticeably taller, as if his growth plate had been reopened by this antigen. This did not happen in mice, so this was intriguing. But he was also declining visibly. He was pale, his color was leaving him, and he was diaphoretic. His decline was much slower than the mice, and John as well. We'd virtually forgotten about John at that point. We had all the hospital restraints in our equipment room. Dave said we should tie him down. He said he was starting to lose it. He looked like hell, like death, and he was huge. He was Arnold Schwarzenegger and getting bigger. His left hand was starting to contort and deform into a horrid claw. It was far too late to take him to the hospital at that point, so I knew we were screwed. We tied him down, claw and everything, though I didn't think that was going to matter. It didn't. Gary and I fell asleep, like idiots. I woke up and it was about 6:15 in the morning. I nudged Gary telling him to wake up and checked on Dave. He was dead. I instantly got a tremendous feeling of dread. How long had he been dead? Was he actually dead? Could he reanimate any second? Did he? Yes, Gary was examining the body, and he was way too close. I told him to back up. It was too late. Dave reached over faster than I'd seen anyone move and had Gary by the throat. He snapped the restraints we had him in as if he was tied down with toilet paper. He then bit a huge chunk out of Gary's shoulder and broke his neck. Pretty sure that's just an accident, though, on account of his new strength. I ran for it as he threw Gary away. Dave stood up and had to be 6'5". He was 5'10" or so previously. I went to the lounge. We had a .45 caliber hidden there, just in case. They were nice we were there late, and the docs can gather its shady characters at night. Anyway, I had the lights off, and I was hiding behind the desk. I could hear Dave's heavy footsteps outside. His respiration's like a chainsaw. I knew he was looking for the door, when I heard heavy footsteps in the room. I'm shaking uncontrollably as I hear him. I ask myself, have his senses heightened? Can he hear me or even smell me? I hear a few more steps, and suddenly the desk lifts up in the air, like it weighs nothing, and Dave's claws holding it up, with just the one arm. His clothing was torn and tattered, and his skin looked like it was rotting off. I don't know if he was startled or what? What I did next was straight out of a ridiculous kids movie. As he stood there holding desk, I simply crawled between his legs out behind and ran toward it. I heard the desk smash into the wall behind me like he'd thrown it. I went to the door outside, then I realized something. I have to stop Dave here now. If he gets out, how many people is he going to kill and then infect? I went back towards the lab. I had 7 shots. I would get as close as I could, put all 7 in the head. Head trauma is what finally stopped the noise. I slowly entered the lab just to see Dave wind up and punch a hole through the wall, after which he stepped out into the sunlight and the marina. I followed as fast as I could. The early birds were all out on the docks, and the marina was getting their boats ready, right for the picking. I hollered, "Dave!" as loud as I could and ran up to him. He spun around with a growl that would make a lion jealous. This caught everyone's attention, of course, and they all turned to see me run up to him, put 2 in his face. He stumbled and swayed before falling back. I then put 3 more in his head, and it pretty much exploded. The shrieks of bystanders filled the area as everyone scattered. Running on pure jet adrenaline and nearly insane myself, I ran back to the lab. Gary had been bit. He needed 1 in his head, too. As I got back in the lab, I saw Gary start standing up. He turned fast as I put 2 in his head as well. No sooner did I drop down pure shock that I heard rushing footsteps followed by, "Get on the ground now!" and "Here we are." End of transcript. So let me tell you why I believe him. I asked about the crime scene when he saw Dave as a creature, which he had no idea. He had no idea about what became the lab and all the research either. Nor did he know anything about John. He was very educated, but he also had street smarts. He told me at that point that any day now, once it came out what happened, the government would be stepping in and he'd be blackbagged. He was right. A couple days later, I was approached at the station by men in suits, FBI for sure. And they told me my services were no longer required in this case, and I was to turn over all materials related to it. I turned over the tape, but I had already saved it elsewhere, so I wasn't mad about it. I asked the arresting officer and the detectives assigned to... They told me they, too, had resigned and the case was being handled externally. I decided to do some investigation of my own. First thing, I checked was there lab in the warehouse that docks. This was at least a week after the event, and I could see men in hazmat suits entering and exiting the warehouse, which seemed to be completely closed off. Not just the areas they rented. I needed binoculars since you could barely go anywhere down there without being stopped and redirected by men who were most certainly mercenaries. Next thing I checked was the hospital. I have a couple of doctor friends. I asked the ER doc and said he'd never seen anything like it. They shifted him up to the floor real quick. Luckily, the admitting doctor on the floor was also a friend. He told me they put a gag order on him, so we met in person. No traceable electronic conversations of any kind. Told me that John died shortly after he was admitted. He told me he pronounced himself he was stone cold dead. He said as soon as they bagged him up, John then sat up and started thrashing and snarling and growling. They called security up, they called the cops, and the nurse aide got bit trying to open the bag. They were able to zip the bag back up without anyone else getting bit. Security guard supposedly lost it when he saw John's dead body going crazy and biting a fellow employee, so he hit him with a portable oxygen tank over the head and apparently enough trauma to kill John again. 2 days later, the aide turned in. Her resignation via email was never heard from again. He also told me John's chart was later deleted internally. You can't just delete a patient's electronic medical record. Whoever it must have been had to be way high up. As for John's body, as someone from the coroner's office came to get the body, but my friend didn't recognize them. He knew all the pickup guys. They also drove away in an unmarked van. City vehicles were all clearly marked. Lastly, I went to the campsite myself, where they went. I used my GPS to find the lake they said they went to, and took the back road that they launched their boats. It was completely blocked off. Not only were there angry no trespassing signs up, but there was even one saying intruders might be shot. I'm hoping it's been long enough that's blown over and nobody's bothering with me anymore, so I can tell the story. As for Michael, I never heard from him again either. I tried looking him up in the system, and his file with the local department had been deleted as well. Police records is another thing you can't just delete entirely. All 4 of their Facebooks have been deactivated, and Google searches only bring up people with similar names. Doesn't even bring up anything from the university. Michael is blackbagged for sure, as for the other 3 post-mortem. I don't know about you, but this has a conspiracy written all over it. And the more I think about it, the more I actually think this all happened, exactly as Michael said. One other thing I can't help but think about was the mouse got away. Is there a genetic super mouse somewhere down in the marina, or did the government whack jobs find it? If they didn't, we all better hope he lays low. It seems like major outbreaks throughout history always start with rodent carriers. End post.
there's a girl in my backup camera. This all started about a week ago. I thought it was going to be harmless, but things are starting to spiral out of control. I don't know if I should even be spending time to write this out, but maybe it'll help me deal with this. Maybe it'll put my mind at ease. I just don't know the turn. I just purchased a new house 2 months ago. It's an older home that was built completely by the previous owner back in the 70s. He lived in it all the way up until his death, about 4 months ago. From what the neighborhood has said, he was a quiet man. He kept to himself mostly, but seemed very nice and waved to anyone who passed by. It's just sort of built back into the wooded area. So there's only 12 or so houses around. You can drive through the whole community in about 2 minutes, being careful to watch the kids. I think there are 5 altogether. 2 at the house at the entrance, and 3 from the house, a few houses down. They haven't caused trouble so far, usually just riding their bikes up and down the street. I'd planned on getting married here soon, but complications arose and my fiance decided that traveling the world meant more than starting a family. So here I was with a large amount of money saved and plans to buy us a new home. I decided to buy it anyways. I work only 20 minutes up the road at a law firm, and this place was in around on the market at the perfect time. 3 beds, 3 baths, a really nice deck overlooking a huge pathway, and a spacious 2-car garage. Most of the houses around here go for a small fortune, and are very common state. So I was bewildered by the price tag on this place. It was a good 35% lower than anything else around for the size of the land. I hopped on it as quickly as possible, and everything worked out great. There were actually no hang-ups throughout the process at all. I hired a cleaning company to clean the place, a moving company to clean it again, and within 3 days, signings are done. I was a homeowner. I've been doing very well, making shitty dinners, and preparing myself for my work. It's not really bad at all. I have some fun stuff to do, like watch TV and walk around the property. I have the same routine every day, but it doesn't seem like it. Last week, however, my routine was broken. I got ready like normal and started the car. I got in, started backing up down the driveway, and I pulled onto the street. Before I could put the car in drive, I saw something in the camera. A little girl. Or so I thought. I sighed a second, thinking I had almost hit me kid backing up. It is a dark 5 a.m. night. Why would she be out there? Buses never come around until 6:30. I took the car in park and got out to see if something was wrong. I went back in, she was gone. Weird, I thought. I walked over to where she was, and it was so silent. She must have been seen. I got back to my car and headed to work, and had an ordinary day after that. The next morning, I had forgotten about the incident the day before and went out about my normal routine. I backed up into the driveway, and this time again, someone was there. She seemed closer to me. I could tell now she was much older. She was in her late 20s, and was looking around like she was lost. Again, I got in the car to call to her, but she was gone. I was around, and there was nothing, just cold pavement. I got back in the car and almost screamed. She was still there, just staring at me back. I could see more features, dark, black hair, that reached down his shoulder. She was pale and looked almost like a ghost. I know how that sounds, but she was so pale. I rolled down the window and looked back to see if there was anything, but there was nothing. I know it's not the same, but I could see her right there at the same time. But not with my own eyes. I sat there and watching me for about 30 seconds. Then turned towards my house and bolted towards. Instinctively, I looked out the car window, hoping to see her, but I didn't. I was pretty shaken up, but decided to still head to work. I didn't actually do much while I was there. I couldn't get the whole situation of her out of my mind. Her silhouette just followed me. I felt like I was going crazy, but I know what I saw and what I couldn't actually see. The next couple days was exactly the same. She would look lost, then get closer to the camera and stare at it. Then pull up towards my house. I took off for work for a few days and decided I was going to try and figure out where she was going. This morning, I drove the same path back into my driveway and saw her. This time, when she bolted, I reversed down the drive so the camera would be facing her and where she was going. It actually worked. Ran down the drive and straight to the garage door. She opened it, but never actually opened it. I couldn't see her while she was inside. That's where she went. I took the car off and ran to the garage. I took the key out and opened the door to nothing. It was a fairly empty stove. Aside from the boxes the moving company left. I hadn't parked it since the doors weren't automatic or hadn't opened. I tried turning on the light, but the bulb just had been burned out. I went inside the house and grabbed a flashlight and came back out. The garage seemed colder than anywhere else. A garage, right? Right? Maybe that's how it is. I looked around for a sign of her. Where she might have gone. But there was some shelf on the wall, an old wooden workbench, and wait, I saw scraps on by the bench? Like, it was moved on the concrete almost. I went over and pulled, but nothing budged. I looked around, felt around, and finally found something. There was a button. Very small button on the inside of the bench. There's no way to really see or know it was there. With my heart starting to beat out of my chest, I clicked it. With that, I heard a small clicking sound, and then a latch pop. I pulled on the bench and then moved it out, revealing a wooden half door underneath it. On it was a symbol carved into the wood, and inlaid with something like copper or bronze. It was a triangle with a cross inside of it. I'd never seen anything like it before. I jumped back after seeing the hash and pushed the bench back, hearing the latch click and the bench get stuck in place. I'm sitting here now in the house wondering what the hell is going on. Who is that girl? Why is there a damn hidden door in this with a creepy symbol on it? Should I call the cops? Should I open it? No, I can't open it. What the hell is even down there? I need to gather my thoughts. I'll update you all when I think of something.
My best friend shoved a weird note under my door one morning. That was how the nightmare began. It was still early when I found the note. I was in my dressing gown, walking through the lounge on my way to get some cereal, when I saw it. A scruffy yellow post-it lying on the mat by the front door. Morning sunlight streamed through the window and framed it in a golden rectangle. Before I'd even read the message, I could tell by messing handwriting it was from Toby. Jamie, come to the old sawmill as soon as you get this. It's urgent, Toby. I read the note twice and stuffed it in my pocket, frowned. Toby's my best friend in our village, and we see each other almost every day, school and the weekend. But he was never normally up this early, and when he'd left me a note before, normally it was on the rare occasions he was up before me, I'd wake up to the sound of him throwing stones at my bedroom window from the garden. I'd part the curtains, and there he'd be, curly-haired teenager, with a big grin on his face, squinting at me through the morning sunlight. This was new. It wasn't like Toby either. Paused for a moment, listening. The house was silent around me. It was a Saturday, which meant Mom and Dad were still upstairs, asleep, lying in. Normally, I'd have been lying in too, but I'd woken up sweating from a nightmare I could no longer remember. I didn't really get back to sleep. So now, here I was, my hair a mess, my eyes still crusted, staring down at the note, feeling a worm of anxiety in my stomach that I couldn't place. I left the house 15 minutes later. Skipped breakfast in the end. I tried Toby's mail a couple times first, but when it kept going to voicemail, my impatience got the better of me. I chucked on some clothes and left the front door, closing it quietly behind me. If Mom or Dad woke up, they wouldn't care that I was off so early. They would want to know where I was going. Then I'd explain the note and be a whole thing. Much easier to slip away unnoticed. Winter sunlight made me squint, so I made my way down the drive. My footsteps crunched over gravel. I creaked the front gate open, wincing at the sound it made. and to reach the main village road, I glanced instinctively to my right, in the direction of Toby's house. I frowned. Toby's house is a little way down from mine, on the opposite side of the road, an old brick cottage like ours. Normally, when I look down there, I can see 2 cars parked outside Toby's dad's Land Rover and his mom's Huguenot. But today, there were 3 vehicles. And the third was a police car? What do you reckon that's about, then? The voice made me jump. I spun around and saw our next-door neighbor, Mr. Willows, leaning over his fence, watching me. Mr. Willows is a bit odd, but he's okay. He's this old guy who lives on his own and spends most of his time out in the garden, smoking, always wears a suit. Today, he had a black blazer and a pink tie on, as though he was off to a wedding. His gray hair spilled over his forehead, which was wrinkled into a frown as he stared at me. I stared back, and he stretched out his hand and thumbed the end of his cigarette, sprinkling ash onto the tarmac. I opened my mouth to say something, but Mr. Willows spoke again before I could. You're up early, Jamie. You have to find your mate. Yeah, I'm gonna go meet him now. You didn't see him earlier, did you? Mr. Willows taking another drag on the cigarette, but now he broke off coughing. He held it away from his face and stared at it, frowning deep scowl. That's how I buy this crap. There at my brand at the co-op, and I'd rather go without than smoke this crap. He flicked the cigarette, and I watched it sail from his hand and land on the road. The glowing tip trailed smoke through the air. Nah, I haven't seen your friend in a while. You have to call him now, are you? Nah, I'm going to meet him nearby. He left a note for me this morning. Mr. Earl has been turned half away as he was getting ready to go inside. But now I paused and looked back. The flicker of some emotion I couldn't quite place behind his eyes. Left you a note, did he? Yeah, I'd better go find out what he wants. I normally wouldn't mind talking to Mr. Willows, but this conversation was starting to drag. I began walking down the road to the left, past Mr. Willows' fence, in the direction of the little footpath that would lead to the old sawmill. As I drew level with the place he was standing, I felt his eyes on me again. I turned toward him and posted my smile on his face. See you later, Mr. Willows. Have a good day. For a second, that same emotion I'd seen before, something almost like confusion, passed the old man's face, but a moment after that it was gone. He nodded and did me a wave. Old codger's probably losing it, I thought to myself as I continued on the road. I glanced back once when I was halfway to the gate, leaving the footpath. Mr. Willows still hadn't gone back inside. He was standing in the same place with the fence, fiddling with the lapel of his blazer, staring at me. To the old sawmill. Why the heck did Toby want to meet me here? As I hurried along the footpath, the green light flittering through the tall hedgerows on either side of me racked my brain. The thing was, we'd already explored the sawmill to death. Then a couple years back, the place had been great first dilapidated a barn and looked something from a horror film, a ruined building which sat in the middle of a wooded clearing, smack bang between 2 fields. It was spooky and remote, and we had a great time climbing the rafters, exploring every dark corner there was to explore. But that had been several years ago. We were older now. We'd already done the sawmill to death. As I reached the little stream that right headed its footpath, I glanced at the sky. Thick black clouds were gathering overhead. It wasn't far from the sawmill now, and it looked like this might be a good thing. Rain was coming. Toby! Toby! My voice echoes in the silence of the clearing. I shivered. The rain clouds were directly overhead now, blocking out the sunlight, turning the clearing into a patchwork of quilt of grays and dark green. The sawmill reared up in front of me, all splintered rafters and chipped brick. An old red door was set into the side of the building, pink faded and flaking off in chunks. Nobody used it in years, though, and that was included me and Toby. We didn't need to. The entire front end of the building was missing, gaping open like a wound, exposed to the elements. From where I was standing, I could see just inside dusty concrete, old wood, and scattering of rusted, bramble-choked tools. No sign of Toby anywhere. Toby! Where are you, mate? Took a few steps forward towards the open end of the building. Shivered again. The wind rushed through the trees at the edge of the clearing, making leaves whisper. I stared at the shadows inside the sawmill and felt the warm anxiety in my stomach again. Those shadows looked too dense. Somehow I was like peering into a cave. Was it possible Toby was hiding somewhere in there? Crouched in the darkness, waiting to jump out at me. It wouldn't have been entirely the character, but then again what? Like, acting like some scared little kid. As the thought was running through my head, I felt the first drop of rain on my skin. That did it. I shoved my nerves to one side and strode forward, covered the remaining distance between myself and sawmill in a few quick steps. When I reached the ruined opening in the building, I paused again, peering into the shadows. Toby? You in there? Took another step. Toby, this isn't funny. This is some kind of wind-up, and you got me here for nothing. I'm gonna be mad. I took another step and felt my foot crunch broken glass. The sound made me wince. All around the clearing, the wind suddenly picked up. Tree branches crashed against each other. Leaves shook. The rain began to fall more steadily. The droplets hitting the clearings in a constant pattern. Took another step forward. The shadows were all around me now. The inside of the sawmill smelled like dust and mold. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, intending to use the little torch function. But as I was pulling out, I caught a shape in the corner of my eye. I looked to my left and bit back a scream. Toby stood in the shadows. He was over by the left-handed wall of the sawmill, standing with his back to brick, facing me. I couldn't see his features in the gloom, but I could make out the thick mop of hair. Jesus Christ, Toby. I feel my heartbeat hammering my chest. My skin, which had been cold a moment ago, suddenly felt too hot. It scared the crap out of me. Toby stood against the wall, unmoving. What the heck are you doing out here? So wind up. Toby didn't say anything. Toby, what? This isn't funny. Toby still didn't speak. Instead, he slowly lifted his arm, held it out away from his body, pointing. I followed his finger. There was something in the shadows near where Toby stood, lying coiled in darkness next to a pile of bricks. What the? Toby didn't say anything, just kept pointing. Rain pounded down harder than the sawmill. The wind howled. I hid my phone in my pocket now, and I thumbed on a little torch. The light spilled out and lit up the shuttery floor. A green tie. That's what Toby was pointing at. Laid coiled against the bricks, a little heap of concrete floor. I said, Toby, what? But I stopped talking. When I got a better look at it, I saw what was on it. I bent down and picked up the tie up. It looked shiny and new if it wasn't for the rust-colored blotches darkening the green. The messy browning stains that covered it, those marks weren't just on the tie either. I saw now. The floor below me had been stained the same color. There were patches of stuff all over the dusty concrete. They looked like this. Toby, what is this? I moved the torch away from the stain and flashed the spot Toby had been standing, and lights struck dusty brick. I felt fear and confusion surge through me. Toby was gone. Toby? The wind drowned out my cries. It roared around the old sawmill, making the wooden beams creak. Rain hammered down outside. Rain and something else. A sound I could only just make out, half muffled as it was beneath the crash of raindrops, the steady pounding thump of footsteps. Toby? I moved towards the entrance of the sawmill, still holding the stained tie in one hand. There was no sign of Toby anywhere. I looked out at the rain, hammering through the clearing in thick sheets. Wind buffeted the half-obscured tree line. The sawmill creaked and groaned. I turned to my left, squinting my eyes, and I scanned the clearing, and I heard footsteps again. They were over to my right, growing louder as they pounded closer and closer. I turned in their direction, my mouth opened to yell for Toby. The shout died in my throat, and the figure emerged from the rain. Mr. Willows was still wearing the suit he'd been in earlier, only now the thing looked wrecked. His pink tie was skewed, his soaked shirt sticking to his chest, his gray hair was sodden, plastered to the skin of his forehead in dark strands. His eyes were wide in his face. He'd been running, one hand pressed to his chest, but as soon as he saw me, he slowed down. He came to a stop just outside the shelter of the sawmill, a few feet away from me, put his hands on his knees and pulled in deep breaths. Mr. Willows? Mr. Willows, what happened? Are you okay? I stuffed my phone in my pocket and hurried over to him, putting my free hand on his shoulder. My mind was whirring with questions, but I couldn't think which to ask first. Fear swirled in my stomach, fulfilled by only the explanation I could think of Mr. Willis' sudden arrival. Either something had happened to my parents, or something had happened to Toby. Mr. Willis seen me heading in this direction and followed me. That had to be it. He'd come to tell us. My mind conjured an image of the police car seen outside Toby's house earlier, and I bit my lip. Mr. Willis, what's happened? Is everyone okay? After a few more seconds, Mr. Willis reached up and put his hand on my shoulder for support. Stood up straight. His face was red, and his breathing was still heavy, but he sounded better than he had a moment ago. His wide eyes scanned the shadowy interior, finally resting on my face. Is it just you here? Yeah, it is. I mean, no. Joey was here too, but I don't know where he's gone, and... What's that mean? Mr. Willis' voice cut through mine, sharp and sudden. What's that mean, he's here? His bony hand still gripped my shoulder. Mr. Willis stared at my face, and then something else caught his eye. He glanced down, and I saw his... Where the heck did you get that? I followed his gaze, and I saw the green tie still clutching in my free hand. I stared down at it stupidly outside the sawmill. The wind gusted. The building around us had shook and creaked. And it was as I looked back up at Mr. Willis that he moved his free hand, quick and agile, as a man half his age, and fastened it around my throat. Within seconds, both his hands were on my neck, squeezing. I choked in a half-breath and stumbled backwards. My heel struck something onto the concrete floor, and I went down, falling hard on my back. Mr. Willis came down on top of me. I felt pain lance through my back. Felt the breath whoosh out of me like air from a balloon. Mr. Willis' face was inches from me now, red and wrinkled, teeth gritted like a dog. His grip around my neck was impossibly strong, a rigid band of bone. I reached out to my hands to grab his arms to try and break his and hold on me, but I couldn't do it. My hands were suddenly too weak. My head felt thick and heavy. My vision filled with blotches of the colored red stains of concrete. Mr. Willis spoke to me. He sounded like he was about to cry. I didn't mean it, Jamie. I swear. I didn't. I liked you boys, and you know that. He tightened his grip, but I can't let you tell. Dun, dun, dun. The vision wavered. Everything was shades of brown and gray. Saw Miss Will's face red and panting above mine. I saw the cobwebs strewn below gleams in the sawmill's roof. I saw the rain lashing down against the clearing outside as bluey black curtains. And finally, before my eyes dripped shut, I saw Toby, looming over Miss Will's, taller than I had seen him before. I saw Toby's face shadowy blank beneath the dark curls, reaching out a hand towards the man choking the air out of me. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was the sound of screaming. I've been in counseling for the past few weeks. Ever since I got out of the hospital, I have bruising around my throat, which is pretty sore, but the doctors say it'll heal soon. It's my mind that might take longer. My parents found me that Saturday morning when they woke up, passed out in our driveway, covered in mud, soaked through the unconscious, half dead. Somehow, after coming around to the sawmill, I'd managed to half stumble, half crawl my way back home. With the injuries I had, nobody can believe I managed that on my own. What they don't know is that I wasn't. I don't remember much of the journey back. It's a bit of blur, pain, and numbness and shadows. But I do remember Toby. I remember him by my side the whole way, helping me along, encouraging me to get back up whenever I fell face down in the mud. Sometimes I thought I heard his voice clearly, and other times it seemed to blend and fade with the wind, but it's always there. It didn't take them long to find his body. Toby had been buried in a shadow grave somewhere among the trees that ran the edge of the clearing, within about 100 meters of the sawmill. Within about 100 meters of the spot where Mr. Rilla tried to strangle me, the same spot the police found him after they came to our house, and I wrote the word sawmill on a small notepad with a shaking hand. When his cause of death came back, they said it was a heart attack that killed him, that the strain of running and trying to choke me was to cause something in his chest to rupture. I'm the only one that knows better. I've seen Toby once when I got out of the hospital. Just once. It was a Saturday morning, and it was early. I had had my trouble sleeping. I woke up from whatever nightmare I was having. My duvet, twisted up around me, and before my eyes were even fully opened, I heard it tap, tap, tap. Could have been a bird outside or a distant neighbor working on the garden. Could have been the sound of small stones striking the window. I swung my legs out of bed and got up to check. I didn't see Toby at first. But part of the curtains, the sunlight was so strong it made me squint. I quartered the garden of liquid gold, bathing in the grass its yellow glow. Toby stood in the center of that glow. When my eyes finally adjusted, I saw him. His form wavering in the morning sun, half lost in light, the opposite of his shadow. But he was definitely Toby, smiling up at me, standing in the same spot he always used to stand. Whenever he came to call for me. There were always so many things I could have said to him, and so many things I wanted to say. But in the end, I settled for a smile. It was all I had time for. As I stared down at the garden, the morning shift in the sky, and Toby was gone as quickly as he'd come, a curly-haired boy, my best friend, fading into a patch of sunlight.
My daughter will only scream upside down if her mother was present. My daughter used to love being turned upside down and being spun around, but now when her mother is in the room, she doesn't like being turned upside down. Only when her mother is out of the room is when my daughter starts to enjoy being turned upside down. My daughter is definitely going to be the type of person who will enjoy roller coasters, and when we go to theme parks, she makes a big fuss about going on one. But she's too small right now. I have experimented turning her upside down when her mother is present many times. She always starts to cry. It is the most unusual observation. What's even weirder is how my daughter still has a good relationship with me when she is alone. So she screams out of fear when I lift her upside down while her mother's in the room, but still has a good relationship with her as any mother-daughter would. It was strange behavior, and I couldn't stop thinking of it. Even whenever I was at work, it pondered my mind so much that it distracted me a little. My daughter was only 3 years old, and it's hard to connect with a child, never mind trying to converse with them. I then went up to my wife, and I opened up to her about what was going on and through my mind. She hadn't noticed at all, but I really told her everything that I had been noticing over the last couple of weeks. I truly thought nothing weird was going on with her daughter. I found that strange because mothers usually have some kind of intuition with these kind of things. And it could be some sort of weird phase my daughter's going through. But my wife brought up some good points about why our daughter is behaving in such a way. Before my daughter was showing these strange behaviors, my daughter had an unfortunate experience of having a stranger in her room. We never knew the person or how he got in, because we have good locks and alarm systems built into the house. Also, the CCTV showed the face of the individual who was in my daughter's bedroom. The person was just simply staring at my daughter. When my daughter woke up and started screaming, when I ran, but the person was vanished, just like into thin air. It was truly a horrible experience. Police couldn't find the person. I suggested seeing a child psychologist, but my wife thought I was getting ahead myself over nothing. I then focused down and thought that maybe she was right, because in the past I have gone overboard with things, and I do tend to overthink. My overthinking has ruined many special occasions, to which I'm still asking for forgiveness. Yesterday, though, everything changed. I was doing some exercises in my room, which I got from YouTube. It's where your feet touch the wall and you have to lift yourself up to the ground, so you're upside down. My wife is also present. You know, in some paintings where those two faces, those two-faced cameras in them, where if you switch the picture of a face upside down, you'll see another face. Well, I saw another face on my wife while I was upside down. It was the face who was in my daughter's room.